Let's get some more now on the Iran deal. Bring in retired United States Army Colonel Larry Wilkerson. He was, of course, Chief of Staff to former Secretary of State Colin Powell. Mr. Wilkerson, a pleasure having you on the show. What is your initial reaction?
I'm rather stunned that we got what we got, frankly. I got the agreement about 5 a.m. this morning. I was unable, of course, to go over it chapter and verse, but I've listened to the statements. I've followed it all along for these past years, and I'm rather stunned that we got what we got. What I would offer to the critics, and what I've offered to critics in the Congress and elsewhere, is show me your alternative. They don't have any alternatives. So this is the best, I think, that we can work with this problem at the present time.
Let me read to you what we understand from the president's speech that was agreed to, and perhaps you can comment on them one after the other. The first is inspectors will have 24/7 access to Iran's key nuclear facilities. Let me stop there. That doesn't mean unfettered access, does it?
No, it doesn't, and I think we have to understand that under the Non-Proliferation Treaty and even the additional protocols, safeguard agreements, and so forth, and this goes even further than that, in fact, much further than that, if I'm reading the text right, these things are the privileges of a country that is a member of the NPT and tells the international community that it is going to do what it has to do under those obligations.
The main pushback...
I was really stunned, too, that we got this side agreement with Director Amani promising by December with Iranian cooperation to render an assessment of Iran's prior military dimensions, that is, those things that it might have done in the past that had nuclear weapon potential. This is something I didn't think we would get. I thought the Iranians would fall on their sword over that, but apparently they have allowed it to happen. We'll see how it comes out in December, but I'm encouraged by that.
The main pushback is that this deal, even taken at its best, is not an if, but a when. And the alternative that's being offered is tighten those sanction screws. It's the only thing that was working. We finally had them on their knees, as we just heard from one of the government ministers of Israel. Do you agree with that assessment?
You back out of this deal and you lose the entire international community, including, importantly, Russia and China, immediately. And the sanctions no longer bind, no longer cripple, no longer do anything because they will be unilateral, and unilateral won't do it. The other aspect of this that no one's talking about, that of course Netanyahu and others are scared to death of, is that this may, in Churchillian phraseology, if I may, begin the end of the beginning, if you will, or the end of the end, however you want to look at it. We may have an entirely different situation in the Middle East. The disastrous decision the United States made in 2003 to invade Iraq produced ISIL. It produced a civil war in Syria. It produced the worst situation for Israel's security in 2 decades. This is the way to begin to stop that. Without Iran, you get no stability in Afghanistan, no stability in Iraq, no end to the war in Syria, no security for Israel ultimately. This is much more important than just the nuclear agreement.
That's not how the Israelis see it, as you know, and in fact they agree that it may be a new day in the international community, but it's a bad one. Chris just interviewed a top Israeli official, a hardliner, who said that the problem is that with this deal, now billions of dollars will flow into Iran, as will other weapons.
I don't doubt that the Israelis, named Netanyahu and otherwise, believe that, because this puts Iran in a position of becoming a fairly reliable and stable partner for the United States. After all, it is the most stable country in Southwest Asia, even today, and therefore giving Israel some competition. I'd probably feel that way if I were Netanyahu with his aspirations too. But that's not the best thing for the region, the best thing for Israel ultimately, and certainly not the best thing for the United States.
But the baseline concern is you have a country that you've just done business with, or at least promised to do business with, who says death to you, U.S., and death to Israel, and they are actively exporting money and manpower to frustrate efforts at peace around the world. You can see why that's going to draw pushback, can't you?
They're also our biggest ally in fighting the greatest threat we have from terrorists, ISIL, in Syria and Iraq. So this is a complex and complicated matter, and it needs some real diplomacy. It needs the kind of diplomacy that I think we've seen displayed over the last year or so, and particularly over the last 18 days or so. I'm glad to see that diplomacy has come back to the forefront and that the military, hard power as it were, has been placed on the shelf for a while. It's about time.
I mean, very quickly, the other bottom line, of course, is that critics of it say that despite all of this, the details and the minutiae in this contract, that Iran won't stick to it.
Well, that's, of course, always a possibility. I watched North Korea very closely, a far more dangerous state than Iran, by the way, and we seem to be virtually ignoring it. I watched how they looked at the Congress's inability to fulfill the agreed framework provisions from our side of the agreement, and I watched how North Korea decided to cheat because of that and built its own highly enriched uranium program and ultimately produced a bomb. It can be done. There's no doubt that it can be done, but I want to hear the alternatives, and the alternatives really boil down to war, and that's not, in my opinion, a very good idea. Tom Cotton recently said, a war with Iran would last a few days. Well, that reminds me of the people who said with Iraq in 2003 we'd be met with flowers in the streets.
Mr. Wilkerson, thank you so much. Appreciate the perspective as always.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.